Welcome to Dynasty Savvy. Today we have some bold predictions for the 2024 season. So, just to be clear, these predictions that we're making here, they're unlikely to happen, but we're highlighting some ceiling outcomes for players that we think are in the reasonable range of outcomes. So, yeah, Blake, what do you think?
Yeah, this is gonna be a really fun episode. I know we're both really excited, and we've done basically looking into a few days of research. I've changed around my picks. I want to hit on two of my three, hopefully at least. And I mean, you're gonna think it's outrageous with my first one, but before we get into that, yeah, I think ADP suggests that these are extremely unlikely and whatnot. But in reality, this is the NFL. Like crazy stuff happens every year, and I think there are certainly signs that point to these directions of how this happens each year. And I certainly think we got some great points. So yeah, well, let's get into it. So my first bold prediction is Anthony Richardson outscores Josh Allen, and I guess you can include. I think he's the dark horse QB1 candidate. I will not be shocked if he finishes top one, top two at the position. Now, the comment I'll start with addressing the bad of why people don't want Anthony Richardson. And funny enough, I was talking to my cousin, and he's like, "Well, why would you say that he's going to be a top five quarterback?" I'm like, he just was like I know it's a small sample size. That's the only ticks there are against him. Is people will say you haven't seen it. You have. I'm sorry. We saw this guy in his first game as an inexperienced quarterback go out there, and he was on his 10 quarters he played against. I know, completely understand small sample size and all the math behind it. To me that cancels out. He didn't have Jonathan Taylor. He's an extremely inexperienced quarterback. Only played one season in college as a starter, and I mean this is an NFL quarterback. I mean, guys take like years to develop. I mean we're still waiting for like the fantasy production from like Trevor Lawrence, etc. Right? Like these guys take a while. I mean look how Mr. Experience Bryce Young had. I mean, he had an extremely tough time. So, yeah, he was phenomenal. He was on pace to be the best quarterback ever in his first 10 quarter pace. Of course, small sample. So if you regress that, maybe he's still the best quarterback because he was pretty dominant as far as like he was going to blow it out of the water. And so basically the best predictor of a quarterback's production is their fantasy points per dropback. Josh Allen had barely led that over Brock Purdy last year. And last year, the actual leader that was kind of excluded from that stat is Anthony Richardson, and he had blown those guys out of the water. He had 0.76 fantasy points per dropback, which is like absurd. You want to have a guy that's getting 0.5. Again, he was like so much better than that. Josh Allen was at 0.64, and again that was the next best. So Josh Allen, of course, with the take, he loses Diggs. He has really no one to throw to. He lost Gabe Davis too. It's basically just Kincaid and some role players. So I honestly I don't think it's crazy to expect that he doesn't finish as the QB1 is basically his take, and he's being drafted as it, where AR is being drafted. Depends on your league. If you're in your office league, I mean AR could be like the quarterback 10 off. He might be the quarterback as high as the quarterback 6. You won't see him go nearly like anywhere higher than that. I'd expect anywhere between that 6 to 10 range. So. Yeah, again, he showed it. He's got weapons. He was playing without Jonathan Taylor last year. That'll only help the offense. They run an extremely fast-paced offense, and he will not be held back running. That's his greatest weapon. And one other point I will say, if you just think Anthony Richardson is not a good quarterback, I'm sorry to tell you, it doesn't matter. I mean, Justin Fields had proven that by dominating in 2022. In fact, he was actually one of the leaders in fantasy points per dropback in 2023, although he had an injury-plagued season, yada, yada, yada. He was good when on the field for your fantasy team, and that is all that matters. My other one thing I'll add before I bring this to you, Dan, is guess what? If you're scared to draft Anthony Richardson, I mean, hey, there's like go get Kirk Cousins, like get another quarterback. Like, who cares if he misses some time? Geez, I mean, hey, worst case, you're picking up Joe Flacco, who just was one of the best fantasy points per dropback player last year, anyways, in fantasy points per game, coincidentally. So I don't see any scenario where you should ever be scared to draft Anthony Richardson. It sounds like you're scared of winning if you're scared of drafting Anthony Richardson, is what I'll say.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that?
Absolutely.
Dan?
I love the call. I knew Anthony Richardson started out hot last season before he got injured, but I didn't realize that quite the pace he was on. That he basically would have been like the best fantasy QB ever if he had like kept that up for an entire season. But like you said, he doesn't like need to keep that up. Even with a few points less than that, he could still finish as the QB1 in 2024. So absolutely love it. I mean, I think he's a QB you want to target if you're in leagues that award 4 points per passing touchdown, like rather than 6. Like, you want a quarterback with rushing upside. So what a perfect guy to like just target the middle rounds. And yeah, also really cool to hear about the fantasy points per dropback.
One thing I'll add about how that stat, by the way, of why I included that is the highest correlated stat for quarterbacks' production is their previous fantasy points per dropback. So if him being his inexperience leading that, I think it's a very strong argument for him.
Yeah. And, they add Adonai Mitchell in the draft. Josh Downs is coming into his second year. Yeah. Pretty good weapons around him. So it seems like a great situation. I like the call.
Yep. So who's your next guy, or who's the next guy up? I guess your first guy, Dan.
Yeah, my first guy. My first bold prediction is that Stefon Diggs finishes as a top 5 wide receiver. So obviously we know Stefon Diggs is a stud year in, year out, especially the last 4 years with the Bills. He has averaged 111 catches, 1,343 yards, and 9.25 touchdowns per season. So, I mean, that's awesome production to get year in, year out. Last year was another good year. He started out hot, and then he kind of like trailed off at the end of the season. Most people attribute that to Joe Brady taking over as offensive coordinator and them running the football more. We also see Diggs's snap percentage start to trail as the season went on. It basically started in the Jets game in Week 11. He even had like a game where like played 46% of snaps against the Cowboys. 60% against the Chargers and Patriots. So from the research I did, it appears that Diggs was also dealing with an injury, specifically an oblique injury. And so I think that also kind of hampered just his ability to like be on the field and play a full like snap allotment. And yes, like the Bills were running the football more, and maybe Diggs did kind of hit a bit of like a veteran wall where he's kind of wearing down at the end of the season. That could have been a factor as well. It's probably a combination of those things. But when he was healthy and had an offensive coordinator that was throwing the ball, he was the same productive Stefon Diggs that we've always known and loved. So typically he goes like in round 1 or so of fantasy drafts. In redraft leagues. I mean, this year you're getting them in like round 3, like maybe like round 4 at times. I mean, it's a huge discount. Yes, he's in his 30s, but he's only a year older than he was last season.
You only need 17 games out of him. It's not a dynasty league either, so.
Right. Here, just give me 1 second here. But yeah, obviously, like the other big change is that he's going from the Bills to the Houston Texans, where he got traded to. So obviously, he loses Josh Allen, which hurts, but you get C.J. Stroud, who's probably just as good of a passer. And we've seen Stroud make some receivers that we didn't think were very good look really good last year. I mean, like, come on, like Nico Collins is all of a sudden a stud in his 3rd year out of nowhere. I mean, Stroud is making Noah Brown this like week winner with these massive spike weeks. So now he actually gets like a legitimate bona fide like stud NFL wide receiver in Stefon Diggs. I definitely think there's a huge ceiling here. Training camp reports have been good as well. I mean, if you're worried about the competition with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, according to a beat reporter, Stefon Diggs appears to be the Texans wide receiver 1 in training camp through the first 8 practices. He was leading all Texans wide receivers in targets and catches. So you certainly like to hear that. So we think the volume will be there. and you certainly like to have players on great offenses like we expect the Texans to be. So there's really not much to, not to love here. His ADP is wide receiver 15 on ESPN, wide receiver 22 on Yahoo.
Yeah.
I'm scooping up Diggs in the 3rd and 4th round everywhere I can get him this year. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree with this, Dan. And I mean, actually, yeah, I'm a big Diggs guy. I've always been. But, yeah, look, they restructured his deal. I mean, he's basically on a 1-year deal now, like a prove-it year, which, like, I mean, to me, that seems, hey, like, Diggs is going to get the ball early and often. He's going to be, like, demanding the rock. And I think this is something where, we saw Nico Collins be great last year, but he was running routes beside Noah Brown, John Mechie, and Robert Woods, right? I mean, there was no one else there for half the season. And sure, yeah, he was phenomenal. They've restructured him, but right now they're confidently, like, the fantasy market is drafting him as the wide receiver 1. I mean, again, it's solely, what if Diggs didn't have the oblique and the OC change? Come on, like that. This wouldn't even be this wouldn't be a conversation. Diggs would be going there. Yeah. Just a little bit of recency bias coming in play here, in my opinion. And I think week 1, to add to this bold prediction, Diggs goes out there, gets 2 touchdowns, 100+ yards, and everyone is just going, wait, why weren't we drafting this guy in the top 2 rounds? Like, this is absurd. And just to highlight, we're taking Marvin Harrison. I love Marvin Harrison. We're taking Marvin Harrison well above Diggs. I mean, come on. I don't know. This doesn't make any sense to me. But, I like the take there, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Diggs probably should outscore Marvin Harrison this year. I mean, that might sound like some, like, bold take or whatever, just because, like, we see Marvin Harrison retired ADP, and we just sort of, like, get as fact. But, like, if you step back and think about it, like, why wouldn't you take, like, Diggs before Marvin Harrison? I mean, you probably don't have to because you can get Diggs later. So, I mean, if you want to play the ADP game and, like, push your luck a little bit and, take Diggs in the 3rd or 4th round, like, that's probably the best play. But, like, he probably should outscore, rookies like Marvin Harrison. So
the math ain't mathing on it. I mean, that's, so, yeah.
All right. What have you got for us next? What is your next bold prediction for 24?
Yeah, this is a guy, like, again, when I'm talking about excited, I mean, Anthony Richardson, I was saying I love Anthony Richardson, and I see all the things. This is my guy at running back. Extremely, and I just keep continuing to get more excited, is Isaiah Pacheco. My bold prediction is he finishes as a top 5 running back, and I really don't even think that is that bold. As Rachaad White just finished in some formats as the RB4, and basically, I think Rachaad White really helps my argument. What was he? How did he get to the RB4 or top 5 RB? Well, he was a terrible back, technically, in real life perspective, but he was a bell cow, and he was in a half decent offense. What's Pacheco? Let's compare him. He's actually been a really good NFL running back throughout his career. He's on the best offense in the league, and he's going to be a bell cow. So, like, come on. To me, he fits this. He has, like, if there's a fantasy blueprint to a league winner, it's Isaiah Pacheco. You can get this guy at, like, the 2-3 turn. I mean, obviously, he feels like one of those guys where in your draft, you just don't know where he's going to go. He has a list of kind of weird range of outcomes, and to me, I'm kind of just ignoring APD. I'm just clicking him. I want him on my team. I don't want to have to try and trade for him. Get him on your squad. Another very supporting argument here for whatever, a very strong argument here. Well, Isaiah Pacheco was great last year, but again, you had Jared McKinnon and these other backs kind of eating into his passing work. Denny, he had 88% catch rate per whatever first targets. I'm sure I can say that better, but 80% of his targets.
He caught 88% of his targets.
And so not only that, but last year was like a really bad year offensively for KC. They averaged 2.2 touchdowns per game, and to put in perspective of what these guys do year after year, and only in 2022 they averaged 1.2 more touchdowns per game only. 1.2 more. I mean, geez, like that's over 20 touchdowns more on the season. And in 2021, they had 3.2, which is a full touchdown more. So 17 more touchdowns than they did in 2023. I mean, obviously, Pacheco is going to see a pie of that. Yeah, he does feel like a guy that can finish in that 15 to 20 touchdown range, and I don't even think that's outlandish. Like, sure, Mahomes gets some rushing touchdowns, but he's no vulture like AR and Hurts and those caliber quarterbacks. So I just see this clear path to Isaiah Pacheco becoming a top 5 running back, and I wanted to add a player in here as much as like Gibbs. I think he actually outscores Jahmyr Gibbs. Granted, there is a chance of a David Montgomery injury. If that is, obviously that's part of built into the ADP with Gibbs going ahead of him. But you're getting the healthy back with no competition versus a guy that's already banged up in Gibbs with the hamstring with big competition and David Montgomery on the goal line and touches. So that's I'll add that into my bold prediction there.
Yeah, and I don't know if you misspoke or maybe I misunderstood, but you're giving those stats earlier. You're referencing 22 and 21. Did you mean to say like 23 and 22?
No, 2023 he had the 2.2 touch, or the Chiefs had the 2.2 touchdowns per game, and I'm just going back to 22, 22, and 2021.
Okay.
They had 3.4 in 2022. 3.2 in 2021.
Gotcha.
Just to get you an example of how good this offense has been relative to like they regressed heavily last year, and it's probably an outlier season for how bad they did. Not having weapons.
Yeah, and Andrew, you can edit out that question and Blake's answer there. I just wanted to see if Blake needed to re-record that or not, but it sounds like we're good there. So you can pick back up here. Yeah, I love your point that the Chiefs offense could actually be really good this season. Unlike last year, even though they won the Super Bowl, they really weren't that great of an offense. Like Patrick Mahomes didn't have a lot of weapons, and now they drafted Xavier Worthy, like the fastest guy ever, and they signed Marquise Brown in free agency. And you got Rashee Rice going into a second year. All of a sudden, they're kind of like loaded with weapons. So it's a scary thought what Mahomes and company can do. Pacheco, like to your point, like what's the competition there? Deneric Prince, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like
people probably have never heard of these guys. There's a chance you never even heard of the backups behind them.
So there's a real chance that he could just absolutely dominate snaps and touches, be one of the rare true bell cows like this season. And so, you want to scoop up guys like that in any chance you can. And if you can get Pacheco around like 2 or 3, I absolutely smashing the draft button on that. He could easily be a top 5 running back. I definitely would not be surprised if he outproduced Gibbs, especially considering the fact that, Gibbs is dealing with the injuries, got Montgomery. Pacheco just seems like a very clean projection for elite running back season, so I love the call.
I should just real quick make it clear. He's being drafted around running back 12. I really wanted to make this a top 3 running back. In fact, I probably should just say, hey, let's just change this to top 3 running back.
Yeah, top 3.
He's gonna push one of those top 3 guys out, or injuries happen too. But I'm going top 3 now.
I'm
top 5. Easy. Let's go top 3. So I truly believe that. I mean, hey, again, Raheem Mostert. I mean, who saw that coming? Sometimes you gotta call your shot here. So
crazier things have happened.
So what do you got here?
My next bold prediction: Jameson Williams will produce 1,000 total yards this year. So, and I'm including receiving and rushing yards because although rushing isn't a huge part of his game, we did see that a little bit toward the end of last year. We saw the awesome touchdown run he had against the 49ers in the conference championship game. So I'm throwing it in there. Figured it'll help me reach that 1,000-yard threshold. For context, I'm a Lions fan. I've seen J-Mo play a lot. It hasn't always been pretty, and he hasn't always been available, whether through coming off the ACL injury his rookie season, then getting the silly suspension in his second year. So certainly hasn't been the best start, but once he actually got on the field last year after the suspension, halfway through the year, he was starting to look a lot better. He just looked more confident out there, and all of a sudden I noticed that like instead of like seeing like another JMO blunder, like he's actually like catching the ball and like making a good play and kind of looked like a different receiver. So that was certainly encouraging to see. Over JMO's last 10 games last year, including the playoffs, he averaged per game 41 total yards, about half a touchdown a game. If you extrapolate that over 17-game season, that would be 705 yards, about 7 touchdowns. So that wouldn't be spectacular, but I definitely think he can build on that. I mean, it was kind of like it was his rookie year last season.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking like, I mean, technically it'd be a third-year breakout, but it kind of feels like more like a second-year breakout for him if he were to do it. I definitely expect a leap in production. I mean, he wasn't even playing like full snaps last season. I mean, he was like playing like 60% of snaps, but like it was really kind of his rookie year. So I think he kind of had to earn his snap share. I mean, look at Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, he like barely wasn't like playing at all like the first half of the season. He wasn't even like a starter. So, keep that in mind. Like we kind of have to think of the context. And like I said, JMO looked better to the eye like the second half of last season, and there are certainly some stats that bear out that like he was actually like a pretty decent like NFL wide receiver in terms of how he was playing. He had a 75% catch rate, which was number 2 in the NFL.
Contested catch rate, was that the? Was that the contested catch rate? The 75%. Yeah. Okay, so you just didn't mention that there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You wanted to redo that
Let me say that again. So there are some stats here. Wait, what was this for? Let's see. Okay, I guess it's on the season. Yeah. So there were some stats last year that indicated that he was actually playing pretty good, like real life football. His contested catch rate was 75%, which was number 2 in the NFL. And he had 1.95 fantasy points per target, which ranked 28th in the NFL. So, like he was actually playing pretty well and being pretty productive fantasy-wise per target. And, that isn't too surprising considering that he was producing like okay numbers in the second half of the season on, only playing like half the snaps or so. So, by all reports, he's expected to be playing more as a full-time player this year. So I would definitely expect him to be playing around like 80-90% of snaps and be a legit full-time player and starter on the team. And the training camp reports have been awesome. We got reports from The Athletic saying that JMO looks like a different player and that he's been getting open against the secondary routinely at Lions training camp. And we know Dan Campbell called JMO a man on a mission this offseason. So all good things you like to hear. And let's not forget this guy was a first-round talent. He was a stud at Alabama. Final season over 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns. I think he's a better player than what we've seen so far. There have been some extenuating factors that have held him back that we talked about. But I'm excited to see what he can do this year with a true off season where he's not like having to be away from the team for suspension, and it seems like he's locked in. And I definitely expect we'll see the best of Jameson Williams this year. I don't think it's even that bold to say that he could get to 1,000 total yards.
I'm listening to this through and hearing only the 41 yards per game while he started to progress. I mean, there's tons of room to improve on that, and he can get that on one play easily, right? So it's like if he can carve out just a better role in this offense and get snaps up. I mean, if he's running like 80% of the routes or whatever, because there's really no one else there. I mean, I know there's some random rookies no one's ever heard except for Lions fans. Then yeah, I see this outcome where again. What are we investing in Jameson Williams? He's a wide receiver 48, right? I mean, come on, like this is so far back here that it's like, well, hey, you just cut him if you're wrong. So yeah, he kind of just fit this mold where if he's getting 1,000 yards, and I think that's pretty realistic that he can get that total yards, he probably will be like a guy that you can plug and play depending on your league. And if maybe in your really shallow league. Maybe he's not the guy you want on your board just because you just don't even he's not even getting drafted. But if you're in a deeper league like a 14-man or even your 12-man and you got a couple of flex spots going, then Jameson Williams certainly could find your flex spots in the season if he does take this step.
Yeah. And, we were just talking earlier about how we want players on good offenses. It doesn't get much better than the Detroit Lions offense these days. And, yeah, you can complain about, well, they got to feed, St. Brown and Laporta and Gibbs and everything like that. But, we did have Josh Reynolds leave in free agency, go to the Broncos. So he's leaving behind 40 catches, 608 yards, 5 touchdowns from last season. That could get, but, we did have on good offenses. Doesn't get much better than the Detroit Lions offense these days. And, yeah, you can complain about, well, they got to feed, St. Brown and Laporta and Gibbs and everything like that. But, we did have Josh Reynolds leave in free agency, go to the Broncos. So he's leaving behind 40 catches, 608 yards, 5 touchdowns from last season. That could get spread around a little bit, but I definitely think a good chunk of that could go to J-Mo, especially if he plays more of like a full-time starter snap percentage. And there's a lot of pie to go around here. I mean, the last 2 seasons with the Lions, Jared Goff has averaged 4,500 passing yards and 30 passing touchdowns per season. So it's like there should be a lot to go around here. So I'm definitely excited about the Lions offense. And you can get the wide receiver 2 on one of the best offenses in the NFL, in the middle rounds of your fantasy draft. Sign me up for that.
Yeah, I mean, basically late rounds, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, some leagues,
I don't even know exactly where he's going as far as his roundage, but it's got to be in double digits. So
I mean, you might be able to get a deal. I mean, everyone just thinks, oh, J-Mo sucks. I'll let someone else draft him. But you see how late you can get him. He could be an absolute steal.
Yeah. One last point to add on there. Vegas has projected the Lions as the second highest point scoring offense. So something
very nice. Yeah, love to hear that. What is your next bold prediction, Blake?
All right, so we've been really positive here, and I hate to do this because this is an exciting receiver that I like personally, but try to think a little deeper. Yeah,
I'm sorry. I shouldn't even say
No. We like Malik Neighbors. This is Malik Neighbors. It's I have him finishing outside the top 30 receivers. Now, I guess I will say his ADP currently is float. I mean, it's kind of all over the place, depending where you go. He's kind of floating around this weird 20 to 24 in ADP. I think what's more important is when you look at the names around him. We were just mentioning the case for Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs is barely going ahead of Neighbors. I think especially on Yahoo. And they just come on, I don't know. That's a no-brainer. And then. Yeah, you get these other receivers. DJ Moore, who just, again, was top 5 receiver or whatever he was. Mike Evans is going behind him. I think he was a top 6 receiver himself. So it's I mean, Malik Neighbors on a just this piss poor offense. I think we've seen this whole Garrett Wilson experience where Garrett Wilson's basically been the heaviest targeted rookie, no competition. In fact, he even had Breece Hall in his offense to at least help move the chains and whatnot amongst the terrible quarterback play. I mean, Malik Neighbors doesn't even have that, right? He has some of the guys that we like as deep dynasty stashes, but these are not running backs they're rookies and guys that have never done anything, and Devin Singletary. So what's the upside of Daniel Jones is basically this argument. Well, and for Malik Neighbors, how does Daniel Jones help him, right, over these other receivers that you could be drafting over Malik Neighbors? Well, Daniel Jones, I'm sorry to tell you, he's averaged 15 touchdowns per season, and in his breakout season, passing, of course, in his breakout season, he only threw 15 touchdowns. As great as he seemed in our mind that season, and was good for a real-life standpoint, 15 touchdowns. So what's the upside for Nate? This is a guy that in some drafts is going to be going as early as the 3-4 turn, and we're taking him. He needs to score 50% of the passing touchdowns. That's not going to happen. First of all, you're going to have some fullback catching 2 touchdowns in the season somehow. Just this is the NFL, man. You can't catch every touchdown. I don't see this upside. What happens if Daniel Jones gets pulled? Locke and Tommy DeVito get in there. You can say all you want about Tommy DeVito. I think he had a game with negative passing yards. If you've been watching Hard Knocks, that does not instill any confidence in this New York team and their management. So there's a lot of just bad vibes, I will say, around Malik Neighbors himself. He's amazing. This is a guy where I think the strategy is keep your eye on him, don't draft him, but see if you can kind of just lowball your way into him mid-season. And who's going to want him if he's getting his whatever, 10 targets and 4 catches, but I don't know, who knows. But he projects really well is what I'll say. There's certainly some upside for him, but I have him finishing outside the top 30 receivers. My bold prediction. Again, I shoot another player. I mean, Devontae Smith goes like well behind him. I mean, I can't even believe that. So that's my argument. And then Dan, this kind of leads into your next bold prediction here to spoil it, but we kind of had a conversation. Deontay Johnson goes well behind him at wide receiver to 38 ADP compared to like the 24-ish for Neighbors. If I have one draft and my life depends on it, I'm drafting Deontay Johnson over Neighbors. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a bold call just based on ADP, but like if you stop back and think about it, like it's really not that crazy. I mean, Deontay Johnson, we've seen him put up a wide receiver one season before. With Malik Neighbors, I mean, by all accounts, he looks like an absolute stud and a beast, but like we haven't seen him produce in the NFL yet. And so, yeah, like rookies don't always start out super hot. A lot of times they get hot like in the second half of the season, and you might already have like a losing record in fantasy by then. Whereas with like Deontay Johnson, he's a proven guy. And so my bold prediction with Deontay Johnson is that he finishes top 5 in targets and catches, and he finishes as a top 5 wide receiver in full PPR league.
Top 12 receiver?
Top 12.
Yeah. You said 5 there, so.
Oh, God. Okay. Yeah. Let me just say that again. Yeah, my bold prediction with Deontay Johnson is that he finishes top 5 in targets and catches, and he finishes top 12. Finishes with okay, I'm saying that over. Sorry, Andrew. My bold prediction with Deontay Johnson is that he finishes top 5 in targets and catches, and he finishes as a top 12 wide receiver in full PPR leagues. So with that prediction, I'm thinking a lot about Adam Thielen on the Panthers last year. No one expected anything out of him. You know, he's just kind of looked at as this kind of old, washed-up wide receiver. But he was really the only guy in the Panthers. And through the first 10 weeks of last season, he was averaging almost 10 targets a game, almost 8 catches a game. He was an absolute stud in fantasy. He was wide receiver 1 during that time. And so now you bring in a guy like Deontay Johnson, who actually is, you know, at this stage of his career, a really good NFL wide receiver, amazing separator, which is exactly what the Panthers need. That's why they brought him in. So it just seems to be an absolutely perfect fit for that offense. Of course, the Panthers also bring in Dave Canales, who says that Deontay Johnson will basically be the centerpiece of the offense. He says they're going to feature him. And although they brought in some nice young talent like Xavier Legette and Jonathan Brooks, like we don't expect those guys to produce right away. It's going to be the Deontay Johnson show. So you're really not too worried about the target competition, but at the same time, we do expect this to be a better offense after, you know, what we've seen Canales do with Baker Mayfield and the Bucs offense last year, and Geno Smith and the Seahawks offense 2 years ago. Those are like the surprise offense of the NFL each of those seasons, and you got to give a lot of credit to Canales. So I'm excited to think about what the Panthers could do this season. I definitely expect Bryce Young to take a big step forward, and if he can have a season like Baker Mayfield did last year, I'm expecting Deontay Johnson to have a big season. So. And I'm thinking back to Deontay Johnson's big season in 2021, where he had 107 catches, almost 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. I definitely think he could, put up numbers like that and maybe even exceed them. I'm expecting him to have a career year. In terms of where you can get him, on ESPN, he's going as the wide receiver 37, Yahoo, the wide receiver 38. Give me all the Deontay Johnson I can get in the middle rounds of my redraft leagues this year.
Yeah, he's always been a target earner. His big issue in fantasy has been he's not been scoring touchdowns, and it's really not been to his fault at all. He's been playing terrible quarterback play, and you see the one season in 2021 where he scores his 8 touchdowns. I mean, that's not even like a crazy amount. That was a pretty bad offense itself, and I think he was like finished as a wide receiver 14, around that area, basically a wide receiver 1-2. I think it was more like top 12, and also. It should also be noted that he did that in 16 games. The NFL hadn't moved to the 17-game schedule yet, so and that was only like 1,100 yards or something that you said too. I think he'll project for just as many catches. I think you said 107, and I mean I certainly see an upside where he a world that I don't think is outlandish to say he can get 11 and 8 this season, or better. Again, just think of Adam Thielen was just being fed by, not great quarterback play as a rookie. No, not again. Things did not line up well for Bryce Young last year. You could go in the coaching, his weapons, no one could get open. I think that these guys can kind of work together, and Deontay Johnson's there to be his best friend. Dave Canales is there to turn things around as he's done in Seattle and Tampa Bay. So I completely agree with this, and this guy is going wide receiver 38, and we're already talking about he can Michael Pittman his way to a wide receiver 1 season, just like I said, Pittman did that last year with I think he was wide receiver 13 full PPR with Minshew, and it's a similar thing. He's the guy that's being fed. He's the first read on every play, and he just PPRs his way. Michael Pittman had 4 touchdowns last year. Deontay Johnson, surely 4. He had 4 touchdowns last year. I bet his under, and I won a lot of money off of it with Kenny Pickett. So that's how I know that. But yeah, he had, or actually, he might even have 4 or 5. So, anyways, my point is, the bright days are ahead here of Deontay Johnson. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that Deontay Johnson has the best quarterback play of his career this season, because if Bryce Young can take that step forward, it's going to be a huge improvement from the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger at the end of his career that was throwing him the ball, that great 21 season that Deontay Johnson still managed to have, or Kenny Pickett last couple years. I mean, it's been brutal. So maybe you can actually give him a good quarterback this year. Bryce Young, former number 1 overall pick. And we're expecting him to take a good leap this season. So, I'm expecting big things from Deontay. He did pop up on the injury report just yesterday, so hopefully that's nothing serious. Keep an eye on that. But if he's healthy, wheels up.
One thing I'll just add too is if you're skeptical of the Bryce Young thing, we're not even saying Bryce Young's going to be useful fantasy, nothing like that. He just needs to get the ball in Deontay Johnson's hands, and just target the crap out of him as. Quarterback. We're just expecting half decent quarterback play. He's had just piss poor quarterback play his entire career.
Yeah, even if he can't be what Baker Mayfield was last year, can you at least just give me some Nick Mullins? Give me what Nick Mullins was doing for the fight. Just chuck it around, get a lot of yardage, and just pepper Deontay Johnson, and that'll get it done.
Yeah, you often see these quarterbacks that even just have a poor season like this. Again, this is the first overall quarterback, first player taken in the 2022 draft. They, went out of their way to get this guy, obviously, in that trade. And while he might not have panned out, to say that he's just this terrible quarterback that shouldn't be starting is pretty ridiculous. The scenarios improve much better. So, come out of your drafts with Deontay Johnson. I completely agree with you. If you're full PPR, reach on him. I don't even care. He's going round 8 or something. You just make sure you come out of your draft with him.
It almost just seems too easy, just stealing Deontay Johnson in the middle rounds this year. So get him everywhere you can. And those are our bold predictions for 2024. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching the video. Definitely like and subscribe if you haven't already.
Let us know if you agree with anything, that if there's anything that you think is not outlandish, or if you're just you guys are crazy. But that's kind of the point of the video, is to make something that is not projected to happen, but we truly believe that these are the outcomes here. So
I honestly, I don't even feel they're all that bold. So let us know in the comments. Let us know if you think these are bold enough, or if these are too outlandish. Definitely let us know your thoughts. Hopefully we kind of found that happy medium there. Also let us know if there are any other episodes you want to see. We're definitely trying to churn out a few good ones before the season starts that will help you guys win your home leagues, win your office leagues. So let us know if there's anything specifically you want to see. And thank you for joining us, and we will see you on the next one.